In this episode, Twitter is #ForTheNerds, Windows Vista is the worst, and Emily engages in moral combat. Welcome to Fax Machine. Hello there, my name is Noah, and I'm here alongside my co-host Emily.
Hi.
And Rob.
Hi there.
We are the hosts of Fax Machine, a podcast by and for people who are curious about everything, but especially the things that make them laugh. In every episode, each of us shares one fascinating fact, along with the incredible stories behind it, and finally, we wrap things up with a pub-style trivia quiz loosely inspired by the theme. This week, our theme is Technobabble, so we'll be covering all things technology, the machines that run our world, and the people who keep them running. Before we get started, our live show is going to be Tuesday, October 22nd at Caveat on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in New York City.
Woo!
Our last live show was so much fun, you're not going to want to miss this one, which is Halloween themed. Our October live show will be recorded on Tuesday, October 22nd, but it will be released just before Halloween, so we are throwing a science seance, telling the spooky, strange, and outright hilarious science behind our favorite Halloween facts. We will certainly be in costume, and there will certainly be prizes for audience members in costume, so it's going to be amazing. Tickets are up now, so please check us out on Instagram and Twitter at FaxMachinePod, and on Facebook at Fax Machine Podcast to get that information. And while you're listening, please swipe over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever you're listening on and give us 5 stars. You can also leave us a review telling us what you liked about the episode. We would love to hear from you. And with that, Emily, take it away.
This week I learned that if you're a fan of augmented reality, trivia, and collecting Catholic saints like Pokemon, there's an app for you, and it's called Follow JC Go.
What?
Yeah. Any guesses as to what JC is short for?
That department store?
Well, I think they're all shuttered, so that would be kind of a cruel joke if that were the case. But
Just follow it out of this world.
yeah. But it is for the one, the only, the Jesus Christ. So Follow JC Go is a smartphone app inspired by Pokemon Go, and like Pokemon Go, uses geolocation services on your phone and superimposes features that you can collect or interact with onto your surroundings as you go about your day and throughout the world. And rather than collecting Pokemon for your team, I don't know, you collect saints. So like real, actual, historical, in some cases martyred saints, as well as biblical characters, and also Marian devotions. So like think like the Our Ladies of blank, all of them. And you assemble them as your E-team, which is short for your evangelization team.
Oh,
my God.
Yeah. So
This sounds like my childhood has been made into the 21st century, so that's nice.
You're just rambling around the nondescript Long Island suburbs, like
Yeah.
looking for different churches.
Carrying prayer cards, stuffing them into an old missile. Yeah, that was
doing about
Missile.
yeah.
What?
Not like a nuclear
like
missile.
the booklets.
Yeah.
Oh,
Not the not the,
like
not
an
the projectiles.
ICBM. I'm gonna get these to heaven one way or another. If I have to take everyone out with me.
Oh my god. Okay. Well, I hate to burst your bubble there, but the Saints don't actually battle each other.
No,
or anything like that. So
that
it's
would
not
be. That's the best part.
of Pokemon. Yeah, I know.
I definitely am
Use
picturing-
forgiveness.
It was super effective. I definitely am picturing a sort of like Street Fighter style, like I don't know, like battle at Heaven's Gates. It's like St. Paul comes down and it's just like fight. And St. Francis. Francis, the one with the dogs.
Yeah, and he just
Or the animals. I feel like he was
Exactly.
a patron
Oh,
of animals.
yes, yeah.
Well, I feel like, St. Francis, his special power would be he could like summon a horde of like animals. And
To just do his bidding.
yeah,
That's pretty sick.
And he would like attack. I don't know
it's
what.
like all the Pokemon in one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Make whirlwind, and then a bunch of pigeons like flap.
Would it be Moral Combat?
So do the
Yes.
do the priests fight with nunchucks?
I feel like we should send this episode to the developers. There's a lot of gold
Yeah.
here.
I feel like also their moves would just be.
gosh.
I feel like a priest type Pokemon would not have a lot of like moves that were effective against other priest type Pokemon. Like a priest type Pokemon or whatever, like a saint type Pokemon would just be like exorcism. And the priest is like, I'm fine, exorcism back at you. It would be ineffective.
Sure.
But I do feel like the one move that would be devastating, and the main thing is you have to use it first, would be excommunication.
Oh, see, I was just going to do like guilt beams.
Yeah.
Like
Guilt.
he's stunned with crippling guilt. Good work. Yeah, I feel like they'd also have a lot of like good opportunities for badass one-liners, like "say your prayers" and then do their thing. That could work. But so again, you walk up to the saints characters, what have you, tap them, but you don't acquire them. I guess this is in lieu of battling until you correctly answer a trivia question about them. So an example that I encountered a lot in articles that I was reading about this is you'd walk up to Moses, just moseying about, I guess. And he would ask you a question like, "Did I say, my God, why have you forsaken me?" To which the answer is...
Oh, heck no. No, it's Jesus on the cross.
I appreciate the heck.
Yeah. Gosh and golly, no. But yeah, he didn't say that. It was Jesus. And Jesus wouldn't have said that. He would have said it in Aramaic as Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. So there. Just put that to rest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that really Aramaic?
Yeah, that's
That's-
the only words in Aramaic I ever learned.
That's pretty impressive.
That's
I mean, that's a
extremely
lot
cool.
more than most people, you gotta
fair.
admit.
Yeah. Catholic high school, though. You gotta
Okay.
love it.
Pretty cool.
That is solid. I feel like
Sure.
you've earned at least like 2 Moseses for that.
Yeah.
Though I would argue that those words...
Another Moses. I've already got 3 of those.
Like the magic carp.
Relatedly, actually, you can also apparently acquire new saints by trading them with your friends in the game.
Ah.
So maybe that could be relevant there. Though that also spurred me to wonder whether saints have relative values then, like baseball cards do. But I feel like that would be heretical, so probably not.
But I bet the most valuable saints were holy graphic.
Amazing. Fantastic.
Trading Cardinals.
Oh my god.
So to highlight some other features of the gameplay that I thought were kind of entertaining. So right now the language options in the game are Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and English. And full disclosure, I did download the game and played it sporadically as I was going about, my wanderings this week. And I did, download the English version, and the English version is actually still currently a mixture of English and Spanish, which I guess then makes it also like an alternative to a language learning app. Maybe you can learn your saints, you can learn your Spanish. It's 2 birds, 1 scone, to harken back to our previous episode. The game also, while
Saint
you're
Peter.
playing... Saint Peter. If only he was the one with the animals. Anyways, the game also encourages you to do assorted good deeds while you're playing. So, for example, if you happen to pass by a church or a hospital, it'll prompt you to maybe stop and say a little prayer, which I think is pretty nice. It also gives you opportunities to donate to charities, and they're working, I think, based on the game itself. It seems like it's still in progress, on a feature that'll let you log in Obras de la Misericordia, or works of mercy, which I think they're kind of phrased in a way that makes me think they're just meant to be sort of general suggestions to kind of guide you towards applicable volunteer activities, like working in a soup kitchen, or like tutoring someone, or nice things like that. But the way they're phrased is very biblical, and I think a little bit too vague. So for example, one of them is clothing the naked, which is a nice thought, but I also remembered that has happened on this podcast before, on an occasion when Noah spilled a bit of wine, and then Rob just fortuitously had a Hawaiian shirt in his backpack. So, I mean, we could possibly log that as an activity in this app in which
Yay.
the naked were clothed. So go us, we're already winning. But
I have eaten 5,000 loaves of bread at once.
there we go. We
Fucking love bread.
fed the hungry. It is really good.
I fucking loaf it.
I love it so much. But some other works that I thought were kind of entertaining include teaching those who don't know, correcting those who are wrong, and forgiving those who offend you, which have all further convinced me that I'm doing the Lord's work on Twitter. So I think I can count those two.
Right here.
Oh, it's right of this podcast. Yeah.
Or, I mean, fine, that works too.
So can we trade in all these points for an indulgence? Or do we have to upgrade to like the premium version?
That might be in the next version of the game. I think they're still beta testing. Another thing that I thought was kind of interesting, and I think like a bit of a missed opportunity, is that so to keep your stamina up during the game, as in like various games of this kind where you have to sort of like find sustenance to keep your character alive, you pick up not mana, even though I feel like it would be more applicable in this game than in any other game that has employed mana as a food source. Instead you pick up loaves. So there you go, Noah. But so yeah, you pick up loaves, water, and spirituality, which is just kind of depicted with a cross icon. I have no idea how you come across it. Maybe by pausing in front of a church for long enough to trick the app into thinking that you're praying there. Not totally sure. Or you could actually pray and not be an asshole. But and lastly, another thing that I thought was kind of cool and like a bit of a historical shout out. If you find yourself too challenged by having to find saints or answer trivia questions, you can also acquire various objects with denarii, which is a form of Roman currency, like an actual historical form of currency. It was like silver coins that you can earn by making charitable donations or by watching biblical educational videos that are also scattered within the Follow JC Go virtual landscape. And I should note, too, that while the app was not put out by the Vatican, technically it was put out by an organization called the Fundación Ramón Pané, it has received a papal blessing, albeit informally. Pope Francis reportedly has played it and thought it was a pretty hip thing. He had a good time. So, if in going about your day, you'd rather lasso St. Peter over Pikachu or Pope Benedict over Bulbasaur, and with that, I'm out of alliterative saints and Pokemon. Follow JC Go may be the game for you, and it is free for download on iPhone and Android.
Well, I just want to pull you up on one thing, and that's that Pope Benedict isn't a saint. He's very much alive.
But there have been a bunch of other ones. So there's got to be a saint in the mix
it's
there.
probably like an older Pope
Didn't say
Benedict.
which Pope Benedict.
Yeah.
I kind of like the
Detail.
idea that in this game, like the numbers after Pope Benedict would just be like leveling up.
Oh my God, he's got a Pope Benedict 22. It's so powerful.
Level up.
So this week I learned that the acclaimed Windows 95 login theme was composed by avant-garde composer Brian Eno, and he made it on a Mac. Yeah.
Interesting.
So this is a kind of fun fact. Brian Eno, he's one of those people who had his hands in every musical bucket. Like he produced with the Beatles. He did a lot of kind of independent music. He's one of like he is the name in kind of like spectral and modern music for the last like 30 years. And so naturally they reached, and he's also, by the way, super common crossword answer. Because three letters, two vowels, like just money right there.
Yeah.
But so you see Brian Eno a lot. Kind of in trivia circles. So Windows, Microsoft, they had a startup sound, like literally just a sound that the computer would make to acknowledge or to let the user know, yes, I'm starting. And essentially for about 5 or 10 years, that's about as good as it was.
Then they upgraded to
These are excellent. So Windows then, they had this kind of renaissance. They knew Windows 95 was going to be big. They put a lot of effort into improving the operating system. And they said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to really make a good 6-second musical interlude while people are waiting for us to boot. And so they approached Brian Eno and they said, we know you're like top-notch composer. You can do all these amazing things. We want you to make something that is chic, optimistic, futuristic, sentimental, and emotional.
we loved your work with Chili's. I want my baby back. Baby back.
But so they had this meeting and they said, we want you to, can you capture all of these sounds? And he said, I think so. Yes. He was actually in a weird place in his career where he felt like he was up against a wall and he like wasn't doing his
What
best.
he needed was a window.
Oh my god. It was a sign. Oh man.
But they said, can you do this? And he said, okay, I agree to do it. And they're like, great. Also, it shouldn't be longer than 3.25 seconds. And so he was like, this is like, I have to rethink everything. Like everything I do to like create tension and build up, I have to throw it out the window and like start to make something new. And so he actually attributes kind of a career renaissance because he totally rethought the way he composed in order to make this. It wound up being 6 seconds long. He could not contain himself to 3.25 seconds, which is so funny. But he produced this thing digitally, and there's so many layers and sounds happening in it. And so what I want to do is quickly... So I found the video on YouTube that has every startup sound from Microsoft ever, and it is awful and painful, and don't do it to yourself. Don't sit there for 8 minutes and listen to every Microsoft sound ever. The link will be in our instant social media account.
But don't click
don't
it,
do
whatever
it.
you do.
But so it's familiar, but it might not be the most familiar. But so I'm gonna play it. Yeah, that last little bit was the part that he didn't make. So that was literally what every Windows sound up to then had been, which is just like a little triumphant trumpet sound. But he made this deep, introspective, like, where are we going? Like, awesome music. So something I find really incredible was that he produced it, he released it, and then another, like a student of modern music, took it, slowed it down 200 times, and made an 8-minute song out of it because things were changing on like the second, like microsecond level. And so they went in and they just slowed it down. And it is this like really cool, like trance song.
Wow.
And so that also exists on the internet. And it's just because he tried to do all the things he normally did and he just kind of compressed it into the amount of time that he had.
I would love to trick someone with that and have them be like, this is so deep and complex and it's making me just like rethink my entire life. Then you're like, yeah, that was the Windows startup noise.
And like in a weird way, that's like what Windows wanted. They wanted their like dumb little sound to mean something and not just be like. And so it reminds me a little bit of like, I don't know. I always am very emotional about the theme songs to news shows. And they're relatively quick and like 20 seconds long. And if you dig around the internet, there's a blog post that I wrote in 2014 about different news channel theme songs and the effect that they have on you emotionally.
Oh my god.
Okay.
So I won't share that either. But like they have like a purpose. They're supposed to like instill in you like a set of feelings like in a very short amount of time. And like what Brian Eno did was kind of make that this is new and it's like it's safe, but it's also scary, but it's also like we don't know where it's going because there's so much future. Like the descriptions.
And yet, we know exactly where we're going because of the past. It's safe. It's scary. It's future. It's past.
It's everything in 6
nothing.
seconds.
All you
And
ever
nothing
wanted.
in forever.
But so he was the first. It was the first time that basically they hired someone outside of Microsoft to produce the music, and I couldn't find how much they paid Brian Eno. It had to be a good contract for 6 seconds of like roughly composed music. And what's really cool about it is it set the precedent that this sound matters. Like this requires a production team to make, and it can't just be like like as it always had been. And so then I started to look up who are the other people that composed later sounds. And so I had this conversation with how old was he? With a 10-year-old last summer about the best Windows startup sounds and like whatever happened to them. And
Is he like referring to the old ones like Windows 2000?
Windows 2000
XP?
XP, and
Okay.
we both kind of agreed XP was probably the best one. And let me see if I have that right here.
Yeah. The finish.
Oh,
is
that
like-
was-
There's a lot happening there.
The finish was the professional version, so
Oh,
I just
okay,
had
was
regular
like,
XP.
Whoa, it's a little edgier than I remember.
Yeah, but like XP has it's perfect. It's everything you want, and it's very soothing. And it was
except,
also
except in an operating system.
yeah, except then you turn it on and the computer sucks. But
What you do is you just turn it on and off.
like
This is my jam.
it is annoying that you can't get that sound any other way, except now you can. But
Yeah.
but so we agreed this was a great sound, and so I was like, well, who composed this 3.5 second masterpiece? And the Windows XP sound was actually a collaborative work that took two people who are like relatively famous. And so it includes Bill Brown. He's an award-winning composer, best known for scoring all 9 seasons of CSI New York. He also wrote epic scores for a lot of games. And so this is something I found out when I briefly patronized Carnegie Hall as a member, was that a lot of shows, when you listen to modern music, they play scores from video games. And those are our modern opuses. They're like 40-minute long composed orchestral works that get sold to like games. And so when I was reading it, it's like, oh, he composed Wolfenstein, Captain America, Super Soldier, and many other video games. And it sounds like oh, whatever, he made video game songs, but that's how you prove yourself as a composer. You can make like an enrapturing like kind of narrative score for a really long time. So Bill, and he's won multiple awards kind of in that industry. The other person who worked on the XP theme song, which again, 3 seconds long, Tom Ozenich, who worked with Microsoft as a consultant. He composed the scores to many movies. There are about 30 movies on his IMDb. Final Destination, Too Fast, Too Furious, my favorite of all the Furious franchise, and his as well. And he received an Oscar nomination for scoring, most recently, A Star Is Born. Yeah.
Oh,
And so
interesting.
he's like a real and he did Sicario, he did Sully, he did like a lot of like well-acclaimed movies who were like in like for not the Oscars but for Golden Globes like nominated for soundtrack. So he's like a real big deal composer, and XP was like right in the middle of it. Like they were like, "Oh, you're making some movies. Why don't you like make this jingle?" And it's like it's crack. It's really good. He nailed it.
It slaps.
Yeah, and so I had a great time going through all of the Windows logos, and they're all like kind of across the board. They're better than the sound that Macs make when they start up. And yeah, it's just like, come on, do something. And I find it really interesting because, and I dislike Macs, and I'm not a Mac user, and you can both stare at me as I sit here using this Mac computer right now to read these things to you.
As it glows, ironically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm much more of a PC person in this modern world we live in. I was also, though, shocked to find out how many versions of Microsoft there were compared to, like, all the Mac operating systems. And so I always liked Mac because they label everything kind of very whimsically, but in an order. So, like, basically they named everything after big cats or mountain ranges. Windows just went nuts. Windows had no idea what they were doing. And it was like 95, 2000, 7, 8, XP, 10. And you're like, what are you doing? But like among them are some of the like more long-standing systems. And so I want to find just one more. This is perhaps the least popular, as indicated in the YouTube comments, of all the Windows boot up sounds.
Oh, that's eerie.
So those are two different versions of Windows Vista. And nobody liked Vista. And it was just like, it was too much. But they went with like vocals and like an ethereal sound. So this week was for me a deep dive into all of the sounds of Windows startup and then trying to find anyone famous who made any of them. And the only other thing I have is a childhood memory of the encyclopedia that came, Encarta Encyclopedia. It used to be like standard issue on all the
Yeah,
computers.
that's right. Oh my gosh.
And it had like a 30-second intro song that it had tribal influence and used drums and pan flutes and like ocarinas, and like there's this montage that happened as it loaded on your screen, and it was emotional. Like there was a lot of feeling packed into it. But it turned on, like, it was just so much. It was so much that opening it was annoying, and I wouldn't want to look things up for school because like I wasn't in the mood to listen to that song.
Wow.
This week, I learned that the founders of Twitter disapproved of hashtags when they were first proposed, reportedly saying, quote, "Those things are for nerds." Hashtag awkward. Hashtag fail. So the story of how the hashtag came to be so popular, and not only on Twitter, but like across the internet and even in real life, to the point where occasionally people will say it out loud in conversation, like hashtag fail, that sort of thing. It's pretty interesting. It was not, in fact, an idea that was generated inside the company. Rather, it was conceived and promoted by Twitter users, and by one user in particular, whose name was Chris Messina, and who goes by the unimaginative but effective Twitter handle @ChrisMessina. He is widely recognized as the inventor of the Twitter hashtag, which all stemmed from a tweet that he sent out on August 23rd of 2007 that asked, quote, "How do you feel about using the," and then here he puts a hashtag, and then in parentheses, pound for groups, as in hashtag Barcamp, and then in brackets MSG for message. And Barcamp is just basically some tech conference, so it was like basically saying, well, if we're all going to this tech conference, I don't want to like bug all the other people who are not interested in hearing about this. So maybe there would be a way where we could all subscribe to like a certain channel, which is actually the word he used, by using this hashtag. And so this initial idea, which he expanded on in a subsequent blog post, was to create what he referred to as channels, which would group discussion about certain topics so that people who were interested in them could find them more easily, and generally to have what he called, quote, "a better eavesdropping experience on Twitter." And I took a minute to read through the comments on the original post of his, which is actually pinned to the top of his Twitter page. And it's really interesting because
Wow.
it sort of acts like a monument or some sort of like public, sort of like a museum display of just like, here was the great moment in internet history where, whatever. And mostly it's people like coming by on like significant dates. So it'd be like the 10-year anniversary of its invention. Basically, there were tons of articles about like, oh, the hashtag is 10 years old, and they all like linked to his post or whatever. So people would go to it and then comment like, "Oh, you've done such a great thing for the world." It's like, whoa, crazy! You should have patented this. And he's just like, he'll comment and just be like, "What?" Like, that's the stupidest idea ever. But occasionally, there's also just like genuine admiration for how this simple suggestion of his bloomed into something that has, proliferated into every corner of the internet. But Twitter, as in the company, was not initially impressed, as I mentioned. According to Messina, they told him, quote, "Those things are for nerds. They're never going to catch on." And it's easy to laugh at how like short-sighted that was, but it's also possible that kind of sort of channels or grouping concept that Messina was proposing be used on Twitter was a kind of like niche concept that Twitter execs likely feared would have been like intimidating to the uninitiated, right? But something interesting about how the story of the hashtag falls into a larger pattern present in Twitter's history is its adoption of user-initiated features. For example, in a New York Times article from this spring, tech journalist John Herman points out that there are two interpretations of this behavior. The charitable one, in which, quote, "it's a company that has learned a lot from the way people use its product," and the less charitable one, which he calls, "its product is broken and perpetually deficient, and its users, to whom it already owes a great deal, are forced to come up with solutions of their own in order to enjoy the value that Twitter still offers, somehow, seemingly despite itself." Those users are then left to watch Twitter implement sleek but self-serving versions of those features, allowing a visionless company to succeed further than it already has. Which is a vicious takedown of Twitter in this New York Times article. It seems a little harsh to me, but I think we should review some examples that led him to say this. So, of course, as we know, hashtags, but also the notion of the retweet. So for a long time, users wanted this function, and they took to just copying the text from a tweet and then putting it into their own tweet with the letters RT in front of it until finally
I remember
Twitter,
doing that. Oh my gosh.
until like Twitter finally like got the message, so to speak. Twitter actually didn't have a smartphone app until users had to build their own and prove that people would use them. And so like there are a few of these were created, and some of them actually ended up with pretty interesting innovations, like the notion of like on an app, like pulling down the page to refresh it was just some user, who was a developer who made his own app, basically to try to convince Twitter that they should make their own smartphone app, and they bought his, and that's like where that comes from. So yet again, sort of just drawing from Twitter users doing their own thing.
Can you imagine a world where you couldn't tweet on your phone? Yeah. Where you had to like go log into a terminal somewhere to like
terminal. I think we've progressed beyond terminal. It wasn't like they were booting up MS DOS. We had real computers.
But I'm picturing myself in college like running into the nearest dorm room and using like the shared computer, like quick log into Twitter. There was French toast in the cafeteria.
Yeah. So basically, Twitter bought his app, and that's how they acquired that concept as well. Another thing that is crazy to me is that before, like on Twitter, you see like sponsored tweet a lot. Before that was sort of a part of their platform, users would sell their tweets directly to advertisers. Like they would go like say, I have a fairly influential platform. Would you like to sponsor my tweets? I will tweet about you. They would do that directly and not through like a Twitter service. And it took, again, this general activity to get Twitter to do this as well. There are some other examples, but the one I find funniest for some reason is that Twitter users came up with the word tweet, and Twitter tried really hard to suppress its use in favor for its term for posts on Twitter, twittering.
Oh my god.
Which is just so stupid. But prior to the company's adoption of the actual term tweet, the page on Twitter had a button that said, quote, post a Twitter update, which is just so long and boring. And now it's just like tweet. So it's better.
That's pretty tweet.
Yeah. So actually, the first thing, users started calling them twits. They were like, I'm going to twit something. And then pretty quickly thereafter, people started saying tweets. But it was actually a year and a half after that, not that Twitter first adopted them in like actually using them in sort of the terminology on the site, but rather the first time Twitter used the term publicly without quotation marks around it was in a company blog post about a year and a half later. So it took actually quite a long time before Twitter started, internally calling them tweets. And then it was sometime, after that it was actually used on the site. In my mind, perhaps the greatest vindication of the tweet versus twittering debate, if that's what you can call it, is that tweet was actually included in the Oxford English Dictionary in 2013, well ahead of the usual 10 years in circulation before a word is usually considered for addition. With the dictionary's chief editor remarking, quote, it seems to be catching on. And actually, also, hashtag was added 1 year later, also ahead of the usual timeline. So, pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
I will say, I think a kind of delicious point of vindication in this story for me is that now, we'll see if that's the case, I guess, when this episode drops, though. If it's truly seasonal, then it should still be around. But at least right now, there is a trending hashtag that is Hot Nerd Fall. So not only are the nerds inheriting the earth and the Twitter, but they're hot while they're doing it. So hashtag Hot Nerd Fall.
I remember we discussed the symbol itself some time ago on the podcast. I think it was Emily's quiz.
It was the Octothorpe.
Yeah, invented at Bell Labs.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of just from one industrial giant to the next.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Was it? Let's move on to the quiz.
There we go.
And this will be important to my quiz because I have written a quiz all about keyboard symbols. Okay?
Ooh, nice.
So my general question to you is, what keyboard symbol am I describing?
Ooh, okay.
Cool.
And a lot of them has to do with sort of the history, often much older than you would expect for these symbols in like writing, right?
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So what keyboard symbol is called the snail in Italy, the monkey tail in the Netherlands, and has been inducted into the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art due to its aesthetic beauty?
At.
The at sign.
Yes. So this is the at sign, thought possibly to have originated with medieval monks, actually, as just sort of a shorthand for at. It's called the snail by Italians, the monkey tail by the Dutch, and as I said, it was in the permanent collection of MoMA, which cited its modern use as an example of, quote, elegance, economy, intellectual transparency, and a sense of the possible future directions that are embedded in the arts of our time.
Wow.
Yeah.
It seems like an unnecessary abbreviation for a 2-letter word.
Yeah.
Like,
It's more fun to write.
it really
Pretty
is.
short. It is fun.
So, question 2. What keyboard symbol is thought to trace its origins to the symbolic abbreviation for the Roman term Libra Pondo?
Oh, that's the pound sign.
The pound sign.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
It is
okay.
directly from the notion of the pound, as in the weight or the actual specific, like the British, like sterling, pound sterling.
Right.
And so basically the thought is that the origin of the symbol comes from the abbreviation of Libra Pondo as LP, and then a line was drawn basically across the L and through the head of the P in order to distinguish the L from a 1, and that was the first intersection. So you imagine like an L and then a P next to it with a line sort of across in sort of near the top of it, maybe 2/3 of the way up. That was across the sort of straight up line of the P and the straight up line of the L. Yeah.
And that is like the pound sterling sign. Like that LP with the line through it. Which is, you can kind of like imagine changing pound sterling into a octothorpe.
Yeah, just drawing an
Yeah.
extra line at the
Yeah.
bottom.
That's
Yeah.
all it takes.
And so that's the idea, is that it started from this like Roman abbreviation, and then through time sort of was it started this Roman term that over time was abbreviated, and then later was just used basically to refer to the weight pound or to the currency pound, and hence the pound sign. And then in a similar way, it was just used so often next to numbers that it eventually became known as the number sign.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. So question 3. What keyboard symbol is thought to trace its origins to the PS, which once represented peso, being overlaid and slightly modified, or to the initials US for the United States being overlaid and slightly modified?
So that's got to be the dollar sign, right?
Oh.
So
Yeah.
a vertical
I guess
line
it must
through
be.
the letter S.
Right.
and some
Yeah.
kind of frill.
That vertical line could make the P. Yeah.
Yep, that's absolutely right. So it's
Yeah.
thought that the symbol for peso was basically originally it was PS, and then the P sort of moved on top of the S, so they were like completely overlaid, and then the sort of loop of the P was taken away, so that line was remaining. But actually, the US, so you can say with a U, there's 2 upright lines.
Yeah.
But there's also a version of the dollar sign with 2 lines through it.
Yeah.
And it's thought that that's
Yeah.
actually where that came from, was just U on top of an S, and then a slightly narrower U, and you cut off the bottom part of the loop.
Oh,
That's
okay.
cool.
That's
Yeah.
very cool.
So question 4. The oldest symbol on the keyboard. What is the name of the keyboard symbol that derives its name from the ancient Greek for little star?
An asterisk?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The asterisk has actually been used as a symbol since Ice Age cave paintings in sort of like Paleolithic Europe. There is also a 2,000-year-old character that looks basically is an asterisk used by, and I don't think this is related to the name of the symbol, but his name is Aristarchus, which kind of does sound a little bit like asterisk, but it's not, of Samothrace, and that's the place he's from, and it's called the Asteriskos, which there's a little, I could show you a symbol, but basically it looks very much like an asterisk, which he used when proofreading Homeric poetry in order to mark the lines that were duplicated. So it was a way of like drawing attention to something, especially in editing. It's also known to be used to mark missing lines in like the Hebrew text, the hexapla. And then over time, basically its shape sort of changed to what we know as the modern Asterisk, it always basically was multiple lines intersecting in the middle, but its meaning basically as a symbol to correct something like a defect continues to this day. So when people are like typing, they make a typo, say in like on some sort of messenger, they'll often write the same, the corrected version with a little asterisk next to it under the bottom.
Wow.
And we've been doing that since cave paintings. Well, I don't know about cave paintings, but at least for 2,000 years.
When
We
you
don't
have to
actually
make
know
a
what they were
correction
correcting.
in your cave painting.
Yeah.
There were 2 mammoths. I'm sorry. There were 3 mammoths.
So question 5. What keyboard symbol was frequently added to the alphabet as the 27th letter in the 19th century? Possibly because it is thought to have originated as a ligature of 2 letters that formed a common word in Latin.
Ampersand.
Ampersand is exactly the right answer.
Ooh, yeah.
It is derived from et in Latin, meaning and basically in cursive Latin, the E and the T sort of ran together. And you can see, if you look this up on Wikipedia, you can see the progression through time of how it becomes like E-T, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
Question 6. What series of keyboard symbols implies something similar to the Latin phrase carpe diem, in that it calls for living life to its fullest extent, even to the point of engaging in risky behavior?
YOLO.
That's exactly right. Thank you.
Really?
You got it, because Y-O-L and O, Y-O and L, are also keyboard characters, so you got the trick.
Yay!
Yeah. So, of course, the phrase YOLO.
I wanted that to not be the answer so badly that I was like, maybe if no one says it, it can just not be the answer.
But you might like it a little more after this, actually, because it's pretty
Okay.
interesting. So the phrase YOLO, meaning you only live once, has been in use since at least the 18th century, when Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, I guess, used an expression translating to, quote, "one lives but once in the world," end quote, in the play Clavigo. Johann Strauss II also titled a waltz, "Man lebt nur einmal," you only live once, in 1855. And in the mid-1980s, Grateful Dead drummer Mickey Hart named his California ranch YOLO, Y-O-L-O, also after the motto, "you only live once." So there you go.
That's cool.
It's a much longer history than you might expect. But so for the rest of the questions in this quiz, which is 2, including this one, 3, they will be basically about internet acronyms. Where they
sure.
come from. All right.
Gotcha.
So in what decade was the abbreviation OMG first used to mean "oh my god"?
I mean,
The 20th.
the
20th decade?
Decade. Oops. we're gonna
It was,
cast that to the ash.
I'll tell you,
heap
it's
of
the 20th
podcast
century.
history.
It was definitely around
no,
the
it was
90s.
no, it was way older. It was
Well,
like
yeah.
the 20s or 30s.
Yeah, you're closer with 20s. So it's the one before that.
20s or
I'll
10s?
go ahead and give it to you. It was
Okay.
the 1910s.
It was
Wow.
correspondence like to Winston Churchill.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we've discussed this, I think. in the
Yeah,
past.
we talked about this
So
fairly
in fact, it
recently.
was in a letter written to Winston Churchill. So it was by a retired British Navy admiral named John Arbuthnot Fisher. And Lord Fisher, as he was also known, sent this letter. He was, quite old. He had retired, and he was basically just complaining about Britain's naval, strategy in World War One. And at the time, Winston Churchill, I think, was First Sea Lord, which is just a fancy British term for like Secretary of the Navy or something. And he also, basically, in this letter, he writes that I hear that a new order of knighthood is on the tappy, and that means like is available to be given to people.
Right.
And then he writes OMG, and then oh my God in parenthesis next to it. Shower it on the Admiralty. So it was like he used the abbreviation, and then immediately it was just like, oh, by the way, OMG means oh my God, which kind of makes you wonder like how any of these things get started. Like if the idea is like, let me use this so it'll be shorter, but then the first time you do it, you have to explain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Ends up being longer, some told.
Yeah. And so this was a letter in 1917.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually, another interesting thing is this was not known for quite a long time. I think it was 2011. This letter was discovered in like papers somewhere that had been like sent to Winston Churchill. So it's a relatively recent discovery that the earliest known usage of OMG to mean oh my God was 1917 in a letter to Winston Churchill.
Oh my God.
Okay. So I imagine that he had a shipmate who was like, OMG. Like, did you see what John was doing in the cafeteria? And this guy was like, OMG, I have to spread this far and wide. So
Exactly.
it's nice.
Does make sense in a naval thing. And they're like, HMS OMG.
Yeah. So question 8. What is the name of the electronic dance music duo consisting of Uncle Red Foo and nephew Sky Blue, who are son and grandson of Motown Records founder Berry Gordy Jr., respectively?
Berry Gordy's offspring made what kind of music?
An electronic dance music duo.
Berry Gordy. Wow. Okay, so like MGMT jumped to mind, but like I don't think they're related to the Gordy family.
So remember that these are all like
They're internet terms
Internet
too.
acronyms.
Yeah.
Oh, is this LMFAO?
this is LMFAO.
Oh dear God.
Very nice.
I find the notion that those two people in that group are like the uncle and nephew to each other incredibly strange. Like when I found that out, like
Yeah, it's
that was
super weird.
That was
Oh,
the
man.
most strange thing about an incredibly strange pair of people. And I have never really recovered from that. But yeah, of course, the band is LMFAO, laughing my effing ass off, right? I guess if I'm gonna say effing, I could probably say ass. I guess we've we've calibrated our level of profanity to usually I'll say effing, but I will say ass.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wherever that puts us.
Consistently.
Yeah. But with that, that's our show. We will BRB in 2 weeks for our next episode. But while you're waiting, don't forget about our Halloween-themed live show at Caveat on Tuesday, October 22nd. It's going to be so much fun, and we cannot wait to see you there. Thank you so much for listening. Fax Machine is hosted and written by Noah Giberson, Emily Costa, and Rob Frawley, and was edited by Noah Giberson. Theme music is by AC Antonelli, and our logo was designed by Mike Zola. Bye!
Bye.